If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. What is the scariest thing that has ever happened to you and still has no explanation? I was in college, living in an apartment next to my best friend. He came over to watch a horror movie. I wish I could remember which one. Deep into the movie, a ghost appeared in a scene and caused pots and pans to crash. The characters were terrified. Not 2 seconds later, all of my pots and pans fell off my fridge and crashed on the floor. My friend and I turned on the lights, stopped the movie, picked up the pots, and never talked about this night again. When I was 15, I had to use the bathroom sometime after midnight. I lived in a 3-bedroom app then, and the bathroom was on the other side of the living room area opposite of where my room was. My eyes hadn't really adjusted to the darkness yet, but I was able to walk through the living room because there wasn't any furniture in the way. After using the bathroom, I opened the door and turned off the light and stared into the living room to let my eyes adjust to the moonlight. In the center of the room there was the dark mass that I couldn't make out, and I looked at it for about 5 seconds and just thought, it's my eyes adjusting still. While I am approaching it, I am looking at it, and when I walk past it, it grabs my waist and I freak out and jerk away and run into my room. My shirt was stretched from the pulling, and I turn on my light and look back into the living room and nothing is there. Don't know what it was, and I always think about it every now and then when I'm in the dark. I lived in a pretty ghetto neighborhood where most of my neighbors have pit bulls that live in their backyard. So the place isn't really notorious for having cats, and on the rare occasion you do see one, it's dead. Anyway, one night I was home alone, pretty sure I was on Netflix, and I was watching a movie when I hear this weird moaning. I just thought it was some weird drunk chick or something, so I look out my living room window expecting a good laugh, but there are dozens of cats. I mean dozens of cats just sitting on my front yard looking straight at my house. And they're moaning. I just shut my blinds and continued watching How It's Made or whatever I was into back then. One night I was driving home from dropping my girlfriend off at her place. We live in separate town, in the same county, about 25 minutes away. They're both country towns, and the route between them is just back roads and state routes that cut through cornfields and cattle pastures. As I turn onto the longest stretch of the road, I notice headlights about a mile back. Every time I go over a hill and back up, they're considerably closer. About 5 minutes pass and the headlights are filling my rear windshield, probably the closest I've ever been tailgated. I've lived in the country for my entire life, so I recognize the lights as a Dodge Ram, and considering how lifted they appear to be, probably country boys in a tuned turbo diesel. Meanwhile, I drive a Mitsubishi Evolution, highly modified as well, but I rarely speed. I don't want tickets. For one thing, insurance is bad enough as is, since I've also hit a deer on this road before. Anyway, we keep on going and this truck flips on its brights and continuously lays on the horn. It's beginning to freak me out. So, when we reach a passing zone, I slow down to 45 and wave him by. Instead, he gets even closer, now maybe 2 to 3 feet off of my bumper, and lays on the horn. Out of my side mirrors I can just see people hanging out the windows, hooting and hollering and waving objects. So, I speed up to 65 miles per hour and try to ignore the truck as it speeds up, as well, staying right there on my bumper. We come down into a small village, population about 150, that has a 40 miles per hour speed limit and ample passing room. I slow down to 35 and wave the guy by again, not wanting to pull over in the middle of nowhere with a crazy driver on my tail. This time, a beer bottle gets thrown by these guys and smashes in the lane next to me, just behind my window. Now I'm a bit pissed, so I brake check them a bit. The driver backs off initially, but not even 10 seconds later is back on my tail, lights on, horn blaring, and more objects being thrown, dip tins, beer bottles, general refuse. Seeing that won't work, I light up the throttle and accelerate out of there. I can hear the truck's turbo spooling behind me and suddenly notice him picking up speed, so I was right that it was a turbo diesel. There's a really twisty, curvy section of wooded area coming into my town, lots of deer in those woods, as well as other wildlife, so I don't feel safe going too fast when we get into this area. I slow down to just under speed limit, all the while keeping a decent speed during the turn so that the truck can't be too close. I've got AWD and a low center of gravity, as well as a decent amount of road track experience, so I keep well ahead of him. But, as you come out of the curves, the road flattens and straightens into a 2-mile-long straight before a few final curves into my town. I'm going about 75 when this guy flies by me, switches over with about a car length between us and slams on his brakes. Anticipating this, because I've seen enough road rage videos on YouTube, I brake, downshift, and floor it, swiftly speeding by as his truck tried to turn into my lane to cut me off. I get my phone out and call 911 as I'm driving into town and alert them. I also alert a friend of mine who runs a bar in town. He was in the IDF for 4 years and did tours in Yemen, Serbia, Israel, and other Middle Eastern countries. His bar is closer than my apartment, and he's a good friend who can fight with the best of them, so I tell him the situation and he says he'll be waiting at the bar and to park right up front. As we come into town, there's a red light with a moderately busy intersection. It's night, maybe 11 o'clock, but it's a college town, so I'm not willing to run it. I stop, constantly watching my mirrors, and so does the truck. All 4 doors open, extended cab, Dodge Ram with a Cummins turbo diesel, I know my shit, and the occupants jump out and run toward my car. Having none of this, I floor it through the red light and make my way to the bar. As I get out, my bar owner friend and a few of his door staff are out there. The truck rumbles by about 2 minutes later, but doesn't stop. I've not seen it since. To this day, I don't know what I did to draw the ire of that truck, or why it followed so closely. Maybe the occupants just hated imports, but I've never gotten hate like that before, nor am I a street racer, just an auto enthusiast who keeps to himself, mostly. Just the other night actually, maybe 4 days ago, I was at home with just my dad and around 3 in the morning I awoke to this horrifyingly loud. I really have trouble explaining this noise. Metallic screeching/rumbling? It's so loud I can hear it through the entire house, so I walk into my parents' room and he's sitting up and says, "Can you hear that too?" We decide to go outside to investigate and I'm telling you this noise is loud enough, I'm guessing, to be heard for miles. It's just this continuous. I don't know. I do not know. It sounded like in movies the sound that comes from inside caves when there is a monster. Or like in The Fourth Kind when the lady was speaking the Sumerian language alien voice or whatever. I don't know how long it lasted because after an hour I just put headphones in and went to sleep. The next morning none of my neighbors said anything and there was nothing in the newspaper. All I have now is a video on my phone of the noise. It was freaky. My friend and I were home alone late one night, and we were watching TV in my bedroom. Normal girl time for us, really. I've always had a sensitivity to high-pitched noises, and my ears ring a lot. Well, my ears started ringing, really loudly. Almost painfully. I cover my ears and assume it's the TV acting up because of the power, which had started flickering earlier that day. That's when I look over and my friend also has her hands cupped over her ears. "You hear that?" she yelled over the noise. I nodded, and attempted to ask her what the hell was going on, when I feel like I was having what I can only describe as a violent asthma attack. I was coughing, practically dry heaving, and I couldn't breathe. She also starts coughing harshly. Neither of us have asthma, nor have we ever had breathing problems. We haven't since that one occurrence. We're both freaking the fuck out, and I happened to look up to the TV to see if it was getting any weird static or a fuzzy picture. There was a guy standing in the window behind the TV. It was dark, so I couldn't make out a face or anything, but he looked pretty big. What freaks us the fuck out to this day is the fact that my room is on the 3rd level of my house, and there's just, physically, no fucking way anyone would be able to get up there. This is honest to God a real experience of mine. During the month of Ramadan, Muslims all over the world wake up before sunrise so that they can eat and start their fast for the day. Since Ramadan was in the summertime, I used to stay up until sunrise, and sleep after eating. Anyway, I was reading my book peacefully until I heard the clack 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 of heels clicking on the sidewalk outside. Since the window was open, I could hear it clearly enough that it was bothering my reading and concentrating ability. However, I waited until the stupid lady in heels, who was walking around in the middle of the night, to walk past the house and out of earshot. As I waited, the noise got louder and louder until it just stopped. I began to hear the rustling of leaves outside and the sound of someone walking on long grass. It was when I heard the familiar creak of the 3rd step on our porch that I put the book down and began to worry. Then, I heard our door open downstairs. Now don't get me wrong, our door is gigantic and made of thick wood. When that monstrosity opens, the whole house could hear it. So there I was, having just heard the whoosh that marked the entry of an unexpected guest at 2:30 in the morning. Everyone's home and sleeping tonight, who could it be? Maybe I'm just paranoid. But then, I heard the woman begin to climb the stairs, leading to the door to my bedroom. Clack clack clack. At this point, I was terrified. Thankfully, I shared a bedroom with my older sister. B, wake up. Someone's coming up the stairs. My sister groggily pushed me away and went back to sleep. So I lay there quivering, waiting for the woman to finally reach our bedroom door. Clack clack clack. Finally, I heard her reach the final step in, as softly as possible, reach the closed bedroom door. I could see the shadow under the door. I shoved the blanket in my mouth, trying to keep quiet, and dug my nails into my palms. Nothing. Just silence. Until the door burst open to reveal the empty hallway. Nobody was there. To this day, my sister will never believe that this actually happened. However, she does admit to me suddenly waking her up in the middle of the night, completely freaked out. At a beach in South Carolina, my brother and I, both adults, were swimming across a 200 feet wide channel that separated two islands, as the tide was coming in. We both had boogie boards, and I was using mine like a kickboard with most of my body in the water, and as I got out about halfway, I felt him grab me really hard on my upper thigh to scare me, right at the base of my butt. It scared the shit out of me, and as I turned to laugh with him etc., I saw in one horrible moment that he was actually 40 or so feet away. I totally lost it. I cursed and screamed and thrashed around for a second, then bolted as fast as I could for the shore. I never saw anything, and whatever it was very powerful but not sharp at all. It felt exactly like a really strong hand. I'm sure it was just a shark or a fish or something, but it was such a sickening feeling to realize that it wasn't him and that there actually was something there in the water messing with me. Still gives me chills. While living in a certain house, I saw the same thing 4 times in one summer. It was a 7 feet tall opaque shadow Jesse standing there. I know I saw it because all the lights in the house were on. I saw it twice while brushing my teeth, standing in the doorway to a bedroom 4 feet behind me. I also looked directly at the shape down the hall. It blocked out the TV in the living room. That's not the scariest part. I was home alone, taking a shower, when I heard what sounded like a 50-pound dumbbell hit the floor and make the entire house shake. I always carried a baseball bat with me since none of the doors locked in the house. I grabbed the bat and started looking around, poking around in the closets, checking under the beds. I moved to the living room and looked into the kitchen. As soon as I turned around, all of the stuff on the entertainment center flew off the top. It didn't land a foot away. It landed across the room. There was no way that 20 DVDs moved that far, that quickly, without a significant amount of force. I should add at this point that I felt a tension in the air I had never felt before. I felt rage. Pure rage. Being the unwise individual that I am, I started picking up the DVDs. As soon as I touched them, an entire shelf of books did the same thing. Flew at me. I then GTFO'd the house and waited for humans to arrive. 3 hours later my roommate arrived. A week later my roommate saw the same opaque black figure and did not sleep for 2 days. Being the weenies we were, the last night in the house we filed ourselves sleeping. A strange symbol appeared on the wall behind me, and a small shadow appeared behind my friend. When we woke up in the morning, my friend checked his video camera first thing. He looked at me, asking if I had touched the camera. Of course I had not. He showed me the camera and the switch was physically turned off. Not because we ran out of tape, but because something had actually turned the switch to the off position. There were still 4 hours of tape left. We promptly freaked out. Turns out an old angry man did in the room I stayed in. He wasn't found for 1 week. All of this is 100% true. I have not embellished one fact. My friends and I were driving around some back roads one night smoking a gotti, or a cigar stuffed with weed rather than cut open and re-rolled. We used to drive around on these back roads in my hometown. I live in a very historical area on the edge of a national park, so these are very old, winding roads through mostly farmland. It's still a very creepy area to drive around at night, even sober. But there was one road that was particularly scary and infamous to the kids in my area. It was a long stretch of road cutting right through the park. There were a few houses right as you turned into it, and a streetlight, and then nothing. No more streetlights, just woods closing in as you went further down the road towards a dead end. The creepiest part was at the very end of the road. As it ended abruptly, there was a burned down house on the right of the road. It had seemingly been there for years, but because the land was unattended, nothing was done with it. So the night we're smoking the gotti, we decide to take Old Baptist Road to close the night. We had finished a good 2/3s of the thing by the time we get onto the road. My friend puts on Farewell Ride by Beck to set the mood. We joke around a bit, but after the last streetlight, all I hear is the music. We get to the end of the street, and because of our experience, we're not scared in the slightest. However, where there used to just be a ditch to the left of the dead end, there was new construction for a home, driveway and all. My friend decides to do a 3-point turn to turn around. He wasn't a very good driver at the time, so it took a bit of time. As he pulls into the driveway, his headlights catch something creeping up from the middle of the driveway. The driveway was essentially a wedge, so we had a clear view of the pavement in front of us. About 20 feet in front of us, a shadow forms on the space where the headlights hit the pavement, and then a figure appears. It's a dog, all black. It doesn't move at first and neither do we. One of my friends yells, "Fuck it, let's get out of here," and my friend begins to back the car up violently. With that, the dog strides at us full force. As he jerks the car forward, the dog hits the side of the car, hard. I was in the backseat passenger seat and felt the force. It felt like a human just shoulder checked the car. He floors it forward. The dog chases. We get to 20, the dog's still there. We get to 30, the dog's catching up to our side. As we get to 40, the dog catches up, and I look over at it. It's got this mean, almost blank look on its face, and then it turns to look over, not even breaking stride, and I see its eyes. Pure black. At this point, I'm shaking. I yell to my friends that it's still there. We reach the streetlight, and with that the thing's gone. I wasn't behind us. It didn't run into the woods. It just disappeared. I kept my eyes on it the whole time. I felt like I was going to die, like I was seeing the last moments of my life. We all went home after that and didn't talk about it for a few days. I don't believe in ghosts. I just don't know what the hell happened. I'd like to think that it was just some stray or some guard dog, but the way it appeared, and the way it ran with us, the way it hit the car, and its eyes, there's just no way. A few weeks after we talk about it. We had free period together and used to hang out in the computer lab first period. We come across one of those haunted places sites, and it's there. And they mention ghost dogs, and other stupid shit. When I was about 10 years old and I got the go-ahead to move off the main floor of our walkout ranch and started living in the basement bedroom. This room had no windows but a hallway door and a door that lead to the shop, what we called the power tools storage that then opened up to the backyard of the walkout ranch. I loved sleeping down there because it was nice and cool, had no windows and thus was pitch black when going to bed. Thereafter shutting the lights off each night I quickly learned to navigate in the dark, refined my REM cycles and tuned my internal clock to only require 6 hours. Sleep a night. Yes, I slept like a hibernating honey bear. Except for one night. There was no context to the dream that I was snapped out of. From nothingness to blackness my eyes plucked open straining to see what had captured my attention. And then I felt it there. Its presence. And I knew I had to get out. I was frantic and spilled over the edge of the bed fumbling along the wall looking for a door or a light switch, anything to break the seal of darkness. My hand slapped along the painted walls like the sides of a smooth cave and all of it felt foreign to me. Where's the light? What's in here? Am I even here? I tried to scream out but as hard as I tried, no words escaped my mouth, like they were being pulled back inside. Flight instincts took off and I clawed along the baseboard of the wall away from the shop door and where it was. My head slammed into the wooden door that led to the hall and the pain was quickly overridden by hope as I spotted a sliver of dull light between the thick shag carpet and the door. My hand slid up the sanded wood and hand slipped over a cool polished metal handle. It turned but the latch held tight and the door just shuddered in its frame. I dipped my wrist and twisted the cylinder the other way but the door didn't budge and it and I were still there, together. A nervous panic quickly tiptoed down my spine as my chin tucked and I stuck my right hand out in front of me, my only shield facing back into the darkness. A sharp pull caught the tip of my pinky and I thought it was over. At this a deeply ingrained reflex initiated and my hand went back to the point of collision, grabbed a hold and flung it in the other direction. I was blinded in white and briefly considered that heaven did exist but then the everlasting light subsided and I was alone, sweating and naked in my room with blood running down my chin. I don't know what happened that night, but logic tells me it was a night terror. However, I think I was abducted and was trying to escape from an alien ship after they put a microchip in my nostril. Now, from time to time it itches like crazy. At least that's the story I tell people when they catch me picking my nose. All of my relatives immigrated from third world Laos. My uncle told me this story once, when he used to be a young man, around my age now, living back in Laos. In Laos, my relatives lived in a village in the jungle. There was a city nearby in walking distance, and people would go there during the day for the markets. After a day of walking around the city markets with his friend, my uncle decided it was time for them to return to the village, because the sun was beginning to set. Thieves usually came out at night, so it was always safest to be home before dark. My uncle and his friend began walking through the jungle back to the village. The sun was setting fast, and it was getting quite dark, but it was still light enough for them to see ahead, barely. They came across a bridge that they always cross, and at the end of the bridge, they noticed that there was a young woman, with her face buried into her hands, sobbing. Since there were a lot of thieves at night, My uncle and his friend were worried that maybe the woman had been robbed, so they hurried over to her. "Are you okay? What happened?" They stood by the woman while she cried into her hands. "Please, tell us what happened. Are you hurt?" The woman still kept her face buried in her hands, sobbing. Then my uncle put his hand on the woman's wrist. "Please, talk to us," he said. The woman pulled her hands away, turned and looked up at my uncle and his friend, and here's the scary fucking part, she had no face. There was just a slab of skin where her eyes, nose, and mouth would have been. Then she started laughing. My uncle and his friend fucking hightailed it to the village, never looking back, while the faceless woman just laughed. My dad's cottage is one of the in the middle of nowhere cottages out in Wiltshire, pretty much miles from the nearest village or whatever. Beautiful place, fields and a stream and woods all around. In the summertime it is a literal paradise. No people, no cars, just peace and quiet and silence. It was Christmas time, so instead of sunny hills it was pitch black at night. Beautiful view of the stars/moon, but apart from that you can't see anything without a floodlight torch. Which I loved. Anyhow, it was about 4 a.m. and I was sat downstairs, curled up in front of his log fire, reading a book, unable to sleep. I really lose myself in books and hadn't realized, up until that point, how late it had gotten. Now as I say, his cottage is in the middle of nowhere. There isn't even a main road near his house, it's one of those tiny windy one-way private country lanes. So nobody was around at all. I heard some sort of screech outside, and then a bang right outside the kitchen window. At first I thought nothing of it. Don't get me wrong, it bloody made me jump, but put it down, maybe foxes fighting or something. But then, and I kid you not, there was an awful growly, husky breathing sound that sounded like it was coming from all directions, if that makes sense. It was like a really loud whisper. But my dad's dog, Midge, had been sleeping on the fire rug, and she got up, stood in the kitchen doorway. Side note, Midge is crazy, she barks and yelps and chases everything from butterflies to rabbits and squirrels and other dogs and even carrier bags. She's a nutter. Instead of barking, as she always did, she froze in the archway to the kitchen, where the sound had come from, well outside of. And she arched her back, wide-eyed, fur on end, and growled in the back of her throat, shaking. The fact that Midge was reacting like this, instead of barking, immediately ruled out foxes. Or owls. Or badgers. Or even deer. I literally couldn't move, and my heart has never beaten so fast in my life. The fact it was so late, and that we were so far away from any other people, I knew it wasn't a person, or that if it was a person they would murder me. Midge stood in that doorway for a good 10 minutes, unmoving, the constant growl and such wide-eyed stare right at the kitchen window. To this day I still have no idea what was outside of the cottage that night, but I sure as hell shat myself a little. Some background info, I have been a sleepwalker all my life. I've walked as far as across the street and I've even sleep pissed in the closet. My room was just as any 10-year-old's room was. It had ugly, old stuffed animals around the floor/bed, posters of current musicians and Pokemon characters, a few nightstands and a dresser positioned across the corner of my room, so that both of the back corners were touching the wall and there was a small triangular gap behind it. This was an extremely heavy dresser, about 7 feet tall. It had 4 large shelves on top of a set of 4 large drawers, and was made of the heaviest oak you could find. One night when I was about 7 or 8 years old, I had a frightening nightmare where there were eyes behind my dresser and they were trying to lure me towards it. They called me by name and told me once I got there, all my terrors would be relieved. I woke up screaming and my parents were in my room frantically trying to find me. I was behind the dresser where the eyes were telling me to go. It took what felt like 20 minutes for my parents to move the dresser aside and, after moving it, we saw 2 eye marks on the back. They were marks made by my own wide-open eyes that I had pressed against the back of the dresser. To this day I don't understand how I got behind the dresser, but what was even more surprising is that not only was I not strong enough to move it so that I could get behind it, it was moved back into its original place, trapping me in. About 4 years ago I lived in this creepy 70s-era house in the downtown area of town. My cousin came over from Ontario and he needed a place to stay for a couple of nights, so we let him sleep in one of our guest bedrooms. We had about 3 extra bedrooms, but we were going through some renos, so he had to stay in this creepy bright baby blue room right beside mine. He slept on a mattress, not a bed. Sometime during the night he burst into my room shivering and in a cold sweat. He looked terrified. He just crumpled onto the floor and lay there. I don't know if he slept at all. Fast forward a year, some friends and I are having a sleepover and I tell them the cousin story, One of my friends comes up with a bright idea to try and sleep in the blue room. So when the time came, we all piled onto the queen-sized mattress and eventually all fell asleep. I awoke to the feeling of worms crawling all over me. Both my friends were gone and the door out of the blue room was closed. I started thrashing around wildly, then I started gagging. It felt like worms were squirming out of my every orifice. I got up and searched for the doorknob. I couldn't find it. I looked for the light switch, bam. Let there be light. All of the squirming ceased and I looked around for a few nanoseconds. There was no worms in sight. Then I dashed out the door scared shitless, only to meet up face to face with my two friends. They asked me what happened and I summed it up. They said they basically had the same experience. Fast forward again another week, I walk into the blue room and the floor is literally covered in worms. Freaked out. I was camping in a pine forest in Western Australia with my friends when I was 16. It was just a normal night, laughing and joking around etc. All of a sudden I look out of the tent and I can see a ring of white lights about 100 meters away, and there's one white light that's bobbing up and down and coming towards us. We turn off all of our torches and I am shitting myself. I've had a bunch of close encounters throughout my life and all I could think of is that this is another one. Whispering, I convince everyone to run for it back to my friend's house, which is 500 meters away. I had no shoes on, but I sprinted back to the house with everyone and was fucking glad that the bobbing light hadn't caught up with us. We got to a little rise with a good view and looked back and the ring of lights was still there. I swear you could see that it was a circle of lights, but you couldn't see the other side of the circle. Two of my mates wanted to go back to check it out, but I insisted that we just go back to the house. I didn't care if I looked like a pussy. I know that UFOs are real, as I'd already had one fly 2 meters above my head slowly with 4 other witnesses when I was younger, and I didn't want to get any closer to those lights. I know that I still don't know what it was for sure and never will, but I have honestly never been more terrified in my life. It makes me know why first contact hasn't happened yet. If most people on Earth reacted the same way I did that night, with terror and knowing I might have to defend myself at some point too. Last holiday season I was working at a dollar store and had the closing shift with my cousin who was my manager too. No one would ever come around at night to shop, so we would use this time to clean and stock the shelves. With Christmas right around the corner, we were sent Santa plushies and dolls that could move and sing when you touched their hands. I already thought they were creepy in the box, but we put them out on the sales floor nonetheless. As the night went on, my cousin and I started hearing random noises around the store that we couldn't explain, and at the risk of getting scared we tried to shrug it off. When it came down to closing the store for the night, we saw a black figure near the Christmas merchandise, so we had to turn the alarm off, check out the store to see if anyone was in there, but all we saw was a Santa plushie sitting near the back room. We booked it to the front, set the alarm, and both dreaded going back to work the following night. Once again we didn't have a customer, so we decided to clean opposite ends of the store. I started hearing one of the Santas singing Jingle Bells. I ran to the Christmas section and they were all on the ground. I ran to my cousin and asked him if it was some kind of sick joke that he was pulling, and by the look on his face you could tell it wasn't him who did it. Again we tried not to panic, and this kind of activity with the Santas went on like this for a couple days. I absolutely hated working there at this point because these dolls would somehow follow us everywhere in the store without us ever noticing them getting in the same aisles as us. Fed up, we gathered the Santas and threw them in the back room back in a box to try to get some peace from them. Not even 2 hours later, while I had my hands full of spices, I see out of the corner of my eye the walking Santas singing and walking towards me out of the back room. I drop all the spices on the ground and run to my cousin who is at the cash register. We closed down the store right then and there for the night. We got in trouble for closing down 2 hours early, but we weren't dealing with whatever the hell it was any longer. I wish I could say that was the end, but before we decided to do a cleansing, yes, silly I know, I had to work one more closing shift. I really needed the restroom but did not want to go to the back room for the life of me, and there wasn't any other place in walking distance, so I sucked it up and went back there. While I was taking care of my business, I hear jingle bells and am grateful that I'm already on the toilet. I try not to panic, get up, open the door and see 3 of the singing Santas are in a triangle right in front of the bathroom. Needless to say I ran out the store. We got a woman to cleanse the store and the activity with the Santas stopped, but my cousin and I came down with a crazy sickness that left us bedridden for a week. To think, this is only one of the scariest things that happened to me. I was at a friend's house for his birthday party, and we were playing a game called Sardines, where one person hides and everyone tries to find them and hide with them. My friend lived on a ranch and had things on his property like a full guest house and shed full of tractors and sharp tool. We could hide anywhere. Also, it was nighttime. Anyways, it was my turn to go hide, so I hid behind one of the tractors that was sitting out in the field. From that spot I had a good view of the main path that my friends would walk to find me. Soon after they started walking to find me, they stopped by his RV and were all looking at it. I heard them say, "Strangzor, we told you that you were not allowed to hide in there." I thought that was quite odd because I was most certainly not hiding there. I then heard them scream as a figure emerged from the trailer and chased them away. I didn't know what to do. I was in shock and scared because I was by myself out there. Eventually I caught up with my friends and we spent the night being chased around his ranch by this figure who was wearing a black cape and had one of those scream masks on. He would hide in the shadows and pop out when we would walk by. The scariest was when he found us in the empty guest house or the tool shed. After we went back inside, one of his parents asked us if any of our friends was still outside because they thought that they saw somebody. My friend claims he never knew who it was. When I was cave exploring in Iowa, there is one particularly large cave that reaches a good 100 to 150 feet into the wall. It's a lot of twists and turns, lots of crawling, very wet and humid, and terribly cold inside the cave. When my cousin and brother ran off to get to the cave, I decided to follow to go with them. We ran all the way to the spot, but my brother couldn't find the cave, so we spent some time looking. I found the cave, because I saw a man look around and then climb inside. We ran over to the cave, and crawled through the entire thing, but the man was not inside. Be aware that there is only one entrance and exit. I never told my brother or cousin about the man, because it didn't seem important, and I didn't realize that he was not there until we reached the back of the cave. I was too scared to say anything, because I didn't want to be that guy telling scary stories in a dark cave.